What's poppin'? What's poppin'? How's everybody doing? Welcome back to another episode of Life According to Rick. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. I appreciate it, you being here with me. And if you've been rocking with me, I also appreciate the love, and I'm glad that you guys are back. So, how's everybody's week been? It's already the first week of 2026 in the books, and it's been a fairly interesting week. We've been dealing with getting Harlem back into sleeping in his room, still dealing with that. So, I mean, I feel like this is a ongoing project that's kind of like making progress, but we kind of hit some bumps in the road like this past week. He the other night he fell asleep in his room, right? And he's been doing good as far as like falling asleep in his room. The the hard task about it, or you know the mission in it, is that he doesn't stay sleeping in his room. So he'll wake up in the middle of the night and he'll like come into our room, and I'll try to like, hey, come on, let's go back to your room, buddy, like you're good. And this little boy just starts tweaking, tweaking. He refuses to go back to his room. He's screaming bloody murder. And it's like, yo, what do I do to get this little boy to stay sleeping in his room? He has his TV in his room, you know. Um, he has a hatch, which is like a little sound machine that he's had since he was a baby, and like the thing is amazing. I love that his hatch because it does like the rain, and you hear like the thunderstorm, and it's like so soothing, right? And it even has like these waves. I think like the waves is like the favorite one, and like the flowing water. So it has like a bunch of different sounds, and it kind of helps him stay asleep. But when he wakes up, forget about it. It's like he wants to come to the room. He wants his mom, and I don't really think it's so much as his mom, but he just likes sleeping in our room. And I don't know what it is. I don't know why he can't stay sleeping in his room, but it's been a challenge. And I'm just hoping it gets better because I'm tired of fighting with him and trying to, force him to go back into his room. And it's kind of like we lose sleep doing that. So it's like we kind of just give in and let him, stay in the room. My wife's been going into his bed so like we're not uncomfortable, because the three of us in the bed, it's very uncomfortable because Mr. Harlem is like an octopus. I call him the Kraken because he will one leg here, one arm there. We're like the letter H. He sleeps sideways. I got one leg in the back. My wife has like elbows and arms in her face. Like it's crazy, but we will get there. So today I want to talk about something I don't hear enough men say out loud. You can be showing up every day and still not be okay. I think a lot of us confuse functioning with being good. Like, we go to work, we paying bills, we showing up as a parent, as a partner, a provider. So when people from the outside looking in, they be like, yeah, he's good. Like, ain't nothing wrong with him. But, being functional doesn't mean that you're okay. Sometimes it just means that, you've learned how to survive without falling apart. And survival mode, it looks good on a man, right? It gets praised, it gets rewarded, but nobody really checks in on the guy who's still standing. And life doesn't wait either. It's like things keeps moving, keeps going forward. It doesn't say, yo, take a break. You had a rough week. Nah, life just keeps stacking on and stacking on. We deal with work stress on top of relationship stress. money issues and parenting pressure, old trauma on top of new responsibility. And it never really hits you at one time. It all shows up at once. That's why one small thing can feel like it breaks you because it's not that one thing. It's everything underneath it that never had anywhere to go. And then when you finally open your mouth and say, yo, I'm tired, or this feels heavy, then you start getting hit with the labels like, oh, you mad negative. You always focusing on the bad. Like, why you can't just be positive? And that's super crazy because you know what? You're just really being honest and transparent. And, this is why a lot of men don't like to open up and we shut down internally. But you know what? Honesty makes people uncomfortable, especially when you're a man who's supposed to be holding it down. So you stop explaining, you stop sharing, you tell yourself, it's easier if I just deal with it, which I feel like a lot of men do. Even myself, like, I'm trying to be more vocal and transparent with my wife, and being able to communicate, with how I'm feeling with things because, like I've mentioned before, I've always dealt with communication issues. I've always bottled things in, and then it's like a volcano. You start holding it in until one day you just erupt, right? And it's like it's not a good thing. But that's where the provider trap kicks in. Somewhere along the line, a lot of us learn that our values come from what we carry, what we can fix, what we can fund, and, how much we can absorb without complaining. So even when we're overwhelmed, the instinct isn't rest, it's push harder because stopping feels dangerous. If I stop, who holds it together? If I fall apart, who's going to pick up the slack? If I admit I'm not okay, what does that say about me as a man? So we keep it pushing, right? And from the outside, you look solid, but inside you're tired, you're numb, you're just one bad day away from snapping and just going bananas, right? And that's what nobody talks about. High functioning men don't usually explode right away, but we disappear emotionally. We get quiet, we withdraw, we lose patience, we lose joy. We seem like the only negative Nancy, Debbie Downer, right? And nobody wants to be like that. You know, I feel like in this society that we live in, it's okay for men to say like, "Yo, I'm not good," and like if you need to check out for a little bit and be like, "Yo, I need to reset, like recalibrate my mental." Then that should be okay because, if we're not good, guess what? We can't show up for our partners, for our kids, for our loved ones. Like we're no good to nobody. So we need to make sure that we doing what we can to get right and, to do what we have to do as men. The crazy thing is that survival mode like slowly starts becoming your personality. You know, me and my wife were having a conversation the other day and she said to me, yo, like you're draining, like you drain me because you're so negative. And like I knew she didn't come from a place of like malice or to make me feel like shit, but it really like sat with me for a second and it took me back, right? But when I thought about it, like I knew what she was trying to say. And later that evening, you know, I was talking to her and I was like, I kind of felt bad when you said that, but I understand like where you was coming from. And what I was trying to explain to her was that, I done been through so much shit in my life that it's just one of those things where like any small thing happens and I automatically like go into that survival mode. I start thinking the worst, like and it's crazy. Like we shouldn't have to feel that way, and after replaying that conversation in the back of my mind, I'm like, yo, like I really have to adjust that because it's like the smallest thing, if it goes wrong, is like automatic. I'm like, damn, like, this and that. And, like you start thinking the worst. And it's like your mind starts playing tricks on you. And that's no way to live. So, I'm definitely going to be working on that. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people can relate. Like, I'm here, but I'm not really here. You know what I'm saying? It's like you're kind of like on autopilot. Like your body is just like this vessel and you're functioning and you're, going about your day, but like deep down it's like you feel empty. And me personally, that realization has hit me hard because I don't want to be living my life like just enduring it. And I definitely don't want to be remembered as someone who handled everything but was never present. Because let me tell you, that shit is whack. you know, a lot of the times, if I'm being honest, I can recall, you know, being in that environment with like my kids and my wife, especially when my kids used to live here in the house, like I I wasn't present, just kind of like in my own thoughts and, kind of just like I said, autopilot. Like I was there and I was, with them in that moment, but like mentally I was just like in limbo, like in another planet or something, if you want to call it that. But, if you're listening to this and you're thinking like, damn, that's me, um, I'll be honest with you, you're not broken, you're not weak, you're not negative. A lot of us we're just, we've been strong for far too long without any type of support. We've dealt with things in life that has kind of left us to fend for ourselves, and all we know is that survival mode, right? um so if you're thinking to yourself like, why am I like this, or whatever the case is, um that's normal. That's normal. But we're in that healing phase, and we're gonna get it right. We just have to rewire our brain and, you know, train ourselves to, when those negative thoughts, come into your mind and, attack you, and make you feel like you about to lose it all. Like, we gotta stop that. But it'll get better for sure. It'll get better for sure, and you're definitely not alone. I think it's very important for us to have like some type of emotional support, right? Like somebody that you can talk to, whether it's your partner or, a brother, a sister, a cousin, somebody that you can go and talk to about certain things, so that way you can kind of vent. Because when, it's like I was saying earlier, like you start bottling things up and you kind of hold it all in, like it can really affect you, like in a lot of ways. It's not fun to have all these thoughts and feelings and not have a way to channel them, right? Like, me and my cousins, we have like a group chat, right? And we talk to each other on a regular, like we check in, like, yo, how y'all doing? Like, what's going on? And it's just one of those things where it feels comforting to like, but like, yo, like I could talk to my brothers, like, cause my cousins to me are like my brothers, and that's never gonna change regardless of how old we get. Life, you know, pulls us into different directions, but at the end of the day, like that brotherhood still keeps us together, and we can always, count on each other to talk if we need to talk or whatever the case is. But I feel like that's very important to kind of have like that support system, and talk to somebody, if you have to. I want to close out tonight by saying, surviving has kept us alive, right? But it's not the same as living. It's like this fight or flight syndrome, and you don't take the moment to really enjoy things because you're like in this frenzy of, you know, the what ifs, and, like everything has to be right, and, the you start thinking, the worst case scenario, right? And it can be draining. Like me personally, I don't like being that way, you know. And like I said, this year is about correcting a lot of things, and that's definitely one of the things that I'm gonna be working on and trying to go with the flow. Try not to let the small things get to me, and go into that worst case scenario mode and creating these obscene scenarios in my head where like it's the worst possible outcome. I want to tell y'all that the other day, I'll make this real quick so I don't get sidetracked. But the other day, because it's winter time, and the weather out here is super crazy, and it was really cold. And my wife came home the other day, and she was like, "Yo, the check engine light came on the car," and automatically, like my brain just was like, "Fuck." Pardon my French, but that was just my initial thought. I was like, "Fuck," like we have one car, right? So it's like our car, it gets us from point A to point B. Like it takes us where we have to go. So automatically, I was like, "Yo, like this cannot be happening. Like, what if it's something serious? Like, you know, then how much is that gonna cost?" And it's like I started creating this scenario in my mind where like my brain was going on 1,000, and like I started spiraling in my mind. I was spiraling, and that's kind of like where the whole conversation about me being negative and all of that came from. So it was one of those things where like after the fact, I kind of like brought myself down and was like, you know what, I'll take the car and to like AutoZone or whatever, and have them plug the machine and see what the code pops up, and it's a sensor. And then the crazy part was that then the check engine light turned off after a couple days of driving the car. So I mean, obviously, it's not that it got fixed, but I'm eventually gonna have to fix it. But I know what it is now, and it's just a matter of correcting the problem. And and I made that small thing into something huge for no reason. And thinking about it, I'm like laughing, and I'm like, damn, bro, like you was really spiraling for no reason. So fellas, just remember, if you are not 1,000%, it's okay, because you know what, we show up regardless of how we feeling. Like, we having a shitty day, we not good mentally, but we still showing up, and that's what matters. But you're not alone, right? And we're gonna figure this out. We're gonna figure this out, and we're gonna be all right. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this episode, and if you know anybody that this might resonate with, you know, send them straight to this episode, and I hope that it can help people in a lot of ways, and I know that I'm not alone. I know that there's many people out there that might be feeling like how I've been feeling, so it'll be okay. It'll be okay. So I hope you guys have a great weekend. I will catch you guys next week. And I appreciate the love. Love y'all. And I'll catch you guys next time.